On the night of July 25, 1956, Captain Baron Raoul de Baudillon of the French liner Île de France couldn't believe his eyes as he stepped to the windows of his bridge and looked out at a wall of fog so thick that he couldn't even see his liner's bow or foremast. Only a few hours earlier, the Île de France left New York Harbor with 940 passengers bound for a routine transatlantic voyage. As the tugboats guided the 30-year-old liner out of her berth, another ship, the Swedish liner Stockholm, was also maneuvering away from a nearby pier. With 534 passengers, the modest liner, bound for Gothenburg, Sweden, followed the Île down the Hudson. Once they passed the Narrows and said goodbye to their harbor pilot, the Île de France increased her speed a full 4 knots faster than the Stockholm and left the smaller liner in her wake as she sailed for Le Havre. Now, only a few hours later, Captain de Baudillon had never seen fog so dense. The ship had already been prepared for the conditions. Her engine room controls were placed on standby, and her watertight doors were closed. Extra lookouts were posted, and her foghorn bellowed into the night. The captain poured himself a cup of tea and paced his bridge, preparing for a long and tedious evening. He constantly checked his radar screen to ensure that there was nothing in their path. A little after 11 p.m., he noticed something strange. 2 radar blips around 40 miles behind them, just south of Nantucket Island, grew closer and closer to each other until they seemed to merge into one. At 11:30 p.m., the ship's chief radio operator raced onto the bridge with an SOS from the Italian luxury liner Andrea Doria, requesting immediate assistance. This would confront Captain de Baudillon with the most consequential decision of his career. If their help wasn't actually needed, diverting his ship would be a costly and potentially career-ending misstep. But if lives were truly at risk, ignoring the call could doom hundreds of lives. At the turn of the century, the Compagnie Générale Transatlantique, also known as the French Line, found itself at a bit of a crossroads. The feverish competition between British and German shipping lines to build larger and faster ships seemed to leave little other space in the market. Similar to the White Star Line, the French line realized that competing for speed was a heavy investment that seldom paid off. Likewise, between the British Olympic class and the German Imperator class, size was also becoming an increasingly difficult space to compete in. Instead, they would turn to something that no other country could match: the unrivaled luxury of French culture. On April 20th, 1912, the 25,000-ton SS France sailed her maiden voyage, less than a week after the loss of the Titanic. Dubbed the Versailles of the Atlantic, the France was twice as large as the next largest French liner at the time, and significantly more luxurious than her competition. She was also technologically modern, powered by Parsons steam turbines that could achieve a competitive 24 knots. With their new liner, the French line had a blueprint for success, and while they easily won over wealthy and fashionable travelers, they also commissioned a series of smaller liners designed to carry immigrants, the backbone of the passenger trade at the time. In 1920, Jean-Henri Delpiaz became president of the French line. He had one guiding philosophy that would define the company long after his death in 1928. To live is not to copy, it is to create. The success of these new liners inspired confidence from the French government. In November of 1912, an agreement was reached that called for 4 new liners built at 5-year intervals, partially funded by lucrative mail subsidies. Unlike other major shipping lines, none of these liners would match the one that came before it. The first was the SS Paris, scheduled for delivery in 1916. Construction began in 1913, but when the war broke out in the following year, the project was put on hold. She was launched on September 12, 1916, but only to clear space in her slipway for wartime needs. Her long-delayed maiden voyage finally took place on June 15, 1921. This meant that a new liner wouldn't be ready until at least 1926, and the French line's mail contract was amended to require only 2 more vessels instead of the originally planned 3. Despite the setbacks of the war, the early 1920s saw a large influx of immigration and a new interest in luxury travel, which helped the company recover. Plans soon took shape for the French line's next liner. This was the first major project under Dalpiaz's leadership, and he was heavily involved with every aspect of the new ship. Construction began on what was then called SS5 in the fall of 1925 at the Pinot shipyards in Saint-Nazaire. She was the first new major liner constructed in Europe after World War I. By March 14, 1926, the Île de France was ready to launch. Her name was announced by Madame Renée Faux, the wife of the president of the Shipbuilders Association. She cut a tricolored ribbon, and the hull was sent down the slipway. Oddly, the new liner wasn't christened with a bottle of wine. Over the next 14 months, she was fitted out with some of the finest fittings ever put to sea. True to Dalpiaz's vision, she would prove to be one of a kind. Prior to World War I, passenger ship interiors were modeled after the great houses, chateaus, and palaces of Europe. This grand style of ornate wood carvings, gilding, and lush ornamentation was designed to make sea-weary travelers feel like they were staying at a grand hotel on land. But by the mid-1920s, new artistic movements were gaining momentum all across the continent, and classic pre-war styles increasingly felt outdated. The Île de France was the first ship to fully embrace these modern movements. French architect and designer Pierre Pitot, one of the founders of the Art Deco movement, was commissioned to design her interiors. The radical new Art Deco style brought together fine craftsmanship and rich materials in an exuberant celebration of luxury, glamour, and faith in social and technological progress. One of the best examples of this departure from tradition was her first-class dining saloon, the largest afloat at the time. Radically simple for almost any major liner, this space measured 88 feet or 26.8 meters wide, 29 feet or 8.8 meters high, and up to 144 feet or 43.9 meters long. The room was illuminated by 112 rectangular Lalique fixtures and paneled in 3 shades of gray marble. It could seat up to 700 passengers and was accessed by an angular grand staircase framed by rectangular columns. The centerpiece of the room was a chromium sculpture shaped like a fountain, but instead of spouting water, it was illuminated from below with brilliant light. Great care was taken to create subtle harmony throughout the ship. 36 different types of wood were used to give natural finishes to her grand spaces. Her spacious first-class cabins were some of the finest accommodations afloat. Many of her suites featured actual windows instead of portholes, and several cabins featured private bathrooms. Her second-class spaces were comfortable and stylish, if not slightly utilitarian. Third class, on the other hand, was basic. Still, it offered a safe, clean, comfortable, and affordable way to cross the Atlantic for students and those traveling on a tight budget. After 33 months of construction, the 43,153-ton Île de France was completed. She measured 791 feet, or 241.1 meters in length, with a beam of 91 feet, or 27.7 meters. She could accommodate 1,548 passengers, with 733 in first class, 399 in second, and 416 in third. She was powered by 32 boilers feeding steam turbines that drove 4 propellers to achieve a top speed of up to 23.5 knots. She was the first major liner built with oil-fired boilers, which would soon become the norm as the coal-fired pre-war ships were mostly all converted to the cleaner and easier to manage fuel. Her initial configuration featured 3 funnels, but only the first 2 served to expel exhaust from her boiler uptakes. Her exterior was somewhat traditional, but she featured a new overhead gravity-operated lifeboat davit design, which kept her promenade decks clear. Her 20 lifeboats could accommodate 2,616 passengers and crew, more than enough for everyone on board. As she neared completion, the Île was heavily publicized with elaborate brochures distributed by the French line, touting her luxury and modernity. With the interruption of the war, it had been quite some time since the public got a chance to marvel at a new luxury liner. Her maiden voyage began on June 22, 1927, though many of her first-class cabins were not even finished at the time. She was commanded by Captain Joseph Blanchard, a veteran of the French line. After an uneventful crossing, she sailed into New York Harbor on the afternoon of June 28 with great fanfare. The Île de France was an immediate sensation, celebrated almost universally for her innovative modern style, She ushered in a new era of ship design and reignited the long-dormant passenger shipbuilding boom that had languished for almost a decade. Within her rivets, she contained all the promise and optimism of the era, with almost no hint at the turmoil her long career would soon bear witness to. For now, she was perfect and she was loved. The Île de France's success helped catapult the French line to record profits in 1928. Receipts exceeded £1 billion for the first time, with more than half coming from their New York service, which carried over 90,000 passengers. By 1935, despite the turbulence of the Great Depression, the Île carried more first-class passengers than any other liner afloat at the time, and frequently sailed with her first-class cabins completely sold out. She soon gained a reputation as a party ship and easily attracted wealthy Americans looking to escape prohibition. On one voyage, Ernest Hemingway, who was sailing in second class, was invited to dine in the first-class dining saloon. At a nearby table, Marlene Dietrich realized that she was the 13th guest and called out for someone to join them. Hemingway obliged, sparking a lifelong friendship between the two. The Île was well known among the rich and famous as a fashionable place to see and be seen. Her captain, Joseph Blanchard, even became a bit of a minor celebrity himself in those days, as the liner continued to garner favorable press, and his photograph frequently appeared accompanied by celebrity travelers. In 1928, she was equipped with a seaplane catapult on her stern, with two CAMS 37 flying boats that allowed her to deliver mail faster than any other ship, even those with faster service speeds. But the seaplanes proved costly and impractical, and were removed in October of 1930. The enthusiasm generated by the Île de France fueled anticipation for the French line's next liner, which began taking shape on January 26, 1931. Known as just T6, this new liner would take every aspect of the Île's success and expand on it. She would be the largest, fastest, and most luxurious liner ever built, a celebration of Art Deco design and nautical engineering. On May 29, 1935, the Normandy sailed her maiden voyage. While she was celebrated for her beauty and innovation, the Normandy faced significantly stronger economic headwinds. Still, with the Normandy joining the SS Paris and the SS Île de France, the French line finally achieved their goal of 3 large, fast, and totally unique express transatlantic liners. This triumph, however, would be short-lived. On April 18, 1939, the SS Paris caught fire while moored in Le Havre. She soon capsized and partially sank. Her wreck would not be removed from the harbor until after the war in 1947. This disaster was only a taste of the horrors to come.
Adolf Hitler's all-out attack on Poland makes the long-dreaded European war a certainty. Prime Minister Chamberlain of Great Britain gave the Nazi dictator a 0 hour for withdrawing his troops from Poland. That 0 hour ends now.
By September 1939, the Île de France had carried more than 245,000 passengers on 346 transatlantic crossings, making her one of the most successful ships on the Atlantic in the 1930s. But only a few hours after she departed Le Havre for New York on September 3, 1939, France and the United Kingdom declared war on Germany, following their invasion of Poland. The Île de France was the last civilian ship to depart France before the war. She sailed with 1,777 passengers, well over her normal capacity. Additional beds were hastily placed all over the ship to accommodate as many passengers as possible, mostly Americans desperately fleeing the inevitable war in Europe. The voyage was tense. Lights were doused at night and onboard activities were limited. She finally reached New York on September 9th. Safely in New York, the Île's passenger services were suspended, and she spent the next 5 months sitting idle. She was towed to Staten Island to free up pier space, and her 800-person crew was reduced to just 100, only enough to maintain the ship. In March 1940, command of the liner was passed to the British Admiralty to serve the Allied war effort. She was hastily modified, and on the evening of May 1, 1940, she quietly left New York with 12,000 tons of war materials bound for Europe. After the fall of France to Nazi Germany in the summer of 1940, the Île de France was officially seized by the British. All French ships were similarly seized by the Allies, including the Normandy. In the fall of 1940, control of the ship was passed over to the P&O Line, and she was hastily converted into a troop carrier in early 1941. In March of that year, carrying 4,000 troops, she joined a massive convoy that included the Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, Mauretania, and the New Amsterdam to transport Australian troops to the campaigns in North Africa. Hasty and sloppy conversions left conditions on the ship far from her pre-war glamour, and she was notoriously hated by the Australian soldiers. On one voyage, troops nearly mutinied due to the poor ventilation, food services, and the lack of sanitary facilities. In 1944, operation was passed over to the Cunard White Star Line as the Île returned to the North Atlantic to begin transporting American and Canadian troops to Europe in the build-up to the D-Day invasion of Normandy. She again underwent significant conversions to increase her capacity to 10,000 soldiers. Onboard conditions were dramatically improved, and these voyages, while still cramped and uncomfortable, became significantly more tolerable. The Île was returned to the French in 1945 after the fall of Nazi Germany, and for the next 2 years she was used to repatriate soldiers. Her contribution to the Allied war effort was immense, carrying an estimated 485,000 troops before and after the conflict. Battered and completely worn out, the Île de France returned to Saint-Nazaire in April of 1947, where she underwent a significant overhaul. Some doubted that the liner could ever be restored to her former glory, but the French line desperately needed their only surviving express Atlantic liner. In 1942, while undergoing conversions to a troop carrier, the SS Normandy caught fire and sank in New York Harbor. The massive luxury liner was a total loss, leaving the French line with just the Île de France and the German Europa, which was handed over as a war reparation and soon renamed the Liberté, to make up their premier transatlantic services. The Île de France was significantly rebuilt in a 2-year restoration. Her 3 funnels were removed and replaced with just 2 larger and more modern funnels. Her whole paint scheme was modified to match the Normandy's, creating a sheer illusion at her bow. Her third-class accommodations were converted to the updated tourist class, and her interiors were extensively updated and modernized. Several art pieces from the Normandy that were in storage at the time that she was destroyed were installed throughout the ship. She re-entered service in July 1949, and once again she immediately proved popular with the traveling public, easily re-establishing her reputation as one of the most luxurious and fashionable ways to cross the Atlantic. She was just as popular after the war as she was before it, representing the best that ocean travel had to offer. On the night of July 25, 1956, the westbound Italian luxury liner Andrea Doria collided with the eastbound Swedish liner Stockholm off the coast of Nantucket. The Stockholm's reinforced bow, designed to cut through ice, sliced into the Andrea Doria's starboard side. The flooding created a severe list that the Doria could not recover from. The Stockholm's bow was destroyed, but she managed to remain afloat. Over the next several hours, the Doria slowly rolled onto her side and sank. While the sinking was slow, the heavy list rendered half of her lifeboats inoperable. With 1,706 passengers and crew on board, hundreds of lives could have been lost if help didn't arrive soon. Responding to the Andrea Doria's distress call was a difficult decision, but ultimately, Captain de Baudillon trusted his intuition and followed an age-old rule of the sea: always aid a fellow sailor in need. He ordered the Île de France swung around to the west, and they raced for the unfolding disaster at their maximum possible speed. Lookouts were doubled to keep watch in the dense fog, and her lifeboats were prepared. Arrangements were made to accommodate as many as 1,500 additional passengers. All of this was done calmly and quietly to avoid sparking panic among the passengers, who had no idea that they were soon to become a part of one of the greatest sea rescues in history. Most of her passengers would actually sleep through the entire incident. Captain de Baudillon carefully monitored his radar screen, watching for anything that might fall in their path. Finally, in the early morning hours of July 26th, they came to a stop about 400 yards from the crippled Andrea Doria. While other ships had arrived on the scene, they were small and ill-equipped for such a large-scale rescue. The Stockholm was badly damaged and hesitant to take on all of the Doria's passengers and crew without another liner to assist. The Île was maneuvered to shelter the two stricken liners from the growing waves and wind. Captain de Baudillon called out to his crew, "Turn on the lights, let them know we're here." All over the ship, lights illuminated the darkness, from the deck lights to the ship's powerful spotlights, all casting the crippled Italian liner in a warm glow that told the Doria's passengers that help had arrived. A number of the survivors distinctly remember the moment the huge letters on deck of the French ship lit up, reading Île de France. Soon the Île's lifeboats began ferrying passengers and crew off the Doria. The Île de France received a total of 754 survivors. The rest of the 1,660 people rescued were taken on by the Stockholm and the other smaller ships. Between the two liners, only 46 people died, all during the collision. Once all the survivors were rescued from the sinking liner, Captain de Baudillon, eager to get injured survivors back on land, sailed immediately for New York. The captain and his crew were celebrated as heroes. The incident would go on to define the captain and the Île de France, though it wasn't the only time the liner was involved in a rescue. In September of 1953, she saved 25 members from a sinking Liberian freighter called the Greenville. Despite the fame garnered from the high-profile rescue, the ship was rapidly aging, and with a new liner already under construction, the Île's days were numbered.
She has an appointment with the scrapyard, but it's an appointment she'll never keep, for this is the last voyage.
By the time of the Andrea Doria rescue, the Île de France was already becoming a relic of the past. In July 1956, the French line ordered what would soon become the SS France, slated to enter service in the early 1960s. With passenger numbers dwindling due to the popularity of air travel, the Île was put up for sale. She sailed her final commercial voyage in November of 1958, and on February 26, 1959, she departed Le Havre for the last time, having been sold to a Japanese breaker. At around the same time, filmmaker Andrew Stone began producing a disaster film about an aging luxury liner that, sails its last voyage. Stone wanted his film to look as real as possible, and the Île de France was rented from her Japanese wreckers for $1.5 million to play the ill-fated liner. When the French line learned that their ship would be the star of such a film, they sued MGM to stop production. Filming was only allowed to move forward when the filmmakers agreed to change the ship's name and remove any identifiable characteristics. They, sort of achieved that. The iconic lighted letters on her deck, which signified salvation for the survivors of the Andrea Doria, were unceremoniously ripped from the ship and thrown away. For the film, she was renamed the SS Clarendon. The ship was towed to a shallow area in the Sea of Japan and partially sunk. Several explosions were set off on board, and her first funnel was pulled down in a pretty lame-ass looking stunt. You'd think it would be cool to see an ocean liner sink in real life, but I find the scenes from the last voyage mostly just sad to watch. It's like seeing someone throw soup on a masterpiece. Maybe it's because the movie is dull and the action scenes are somewhat poorly executed, but I think there's something more that lends these scenes an air of melancholy. They embody the mid-century rejection of ocean travel, a once treasured piece of art that no one cared to save. But time is cruel, fashions come and go, and what was once treasured becomes expendable. A cheap prop smashed to pieces for a movie most people probably forgot on the drive home from the theater. The Last Voyage was released in February 1960. The film received mixed but mostly negative reviews and ended up losing $551,000 for MGM. What was left of the Île de France was towed to a scrapyard in Japan. By the end of 1961, she was gone. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, help the channel grow by leaving a like and comment below. My goal is to hit 100,000 subscribers, and I think we can do it if we all just believe. And hit subscribe. I'd like to give a special shout out to my supporters on Patreon. They would never sell me out to make a cheesy disaster flick. Alright crew, that's all I've got. Until the next one, be nice to people.